Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show and to our third and final programme in our series on Britain's railways. Last week we looked at the case for and against HS2 and found there's still a wide cross-section of support despite mounting concerns of cost overruns and delays. This week we've been out and about looking at the fate of some of the communities in London who are getting in the way of the high-speed revolution and many think have been just cast aside. Is their treatment the shape of things to come? But first, here's Tasmina with your tweets, your emails and your messages.
Now, our series on railways and HS2 has been very timely indeed, with the newspaper last week leading on what they call the UK rail revolution. They say mass delays and timetable chaos are persuading the Prime Minister to overhaul the whole system. Apparently, Downing Street fears Corbyn can win power with 3 nationalisation plans. We suddenly had lots of tweets in response to last week's show. The first from someone who calls themselves Out of Tweet, who says, fantastic points made by Alex Salmond. Volvo have just released their concept car, which is a driverless vehicle that doubles as a bedroom and an office. It'll make rail utterly obsolete by 2033. It's madness to continue with HS2, they say. Scott says, bit like M6, it'll stop at Carlisle. Lynn says, fascinating series. It's great how the show gives both points of view. Personally, I would like the trains nationalised. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Lynn. Trev says it'll be the biggest waste of taxpayers' money ever. A not happy chappy there. And finally, James says, almost made HS2 interesting. Worth a look. And there's a reminder that you can watch all of our shows on rt.com and also on Alex's YouTube channel. High-speed rail has had a fair political wind at its back. But the developers have not had things all of their own way. Under the triple no slogan of no business case, no environmental case and no money to pay for it, the protesters have fought a lively campaign. Alex is speaking to the chair of Stop HS2, Penny Gaines, asking is it too late to put a spoke in the fast rail wheel?
Penny, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show. Now, what would you say to people who would say, look, you know, France has got fast rail, Japan's got fast rail, why on earth shouldn't the UK have fast rail as well?
What people in France and Germany and so on are finding is that they're turning their backs on high-speed rail. They're saying we've spent too much money and too much time on these fast, glitzy lines. We need to start looking at local transport, which has been neglected with all this concentration on the fastest and the glitziest, more glamorous trains.
Obviously, there's a big problem of overcrowding. Say, around London, there's a big problem of overcrowding. Even the leader of the opposition can't get a seat in the train. So how can you possibly cram more people onto these overcrowded lines unless you build a totally new, all singing, all dancing fast rail?
The question that they asked themselves is, should we build a high-speed railway line? They didn't look at all the different options of local infrastructure and local lines. They said, right, we're going to build a high-speed railway, and then every other decision made came from that. If you've got a high-speed railway line, you can't have too many stations. So they're not building lots of stations close to London, which you would think they'd want to do if they wanted a London-based railway to get commuters in.
But surely if the fast train is on one track, then it makes it a lot easier to run the ones that are chugging about because they're not getting in the road of the express train.
Part of the justification for it involves cancelling existing trains. So it's not a case of having more trains, it's having fewer trains on the existing lines. That's in their economic plans for HS2. But the big question it comes back to, should we build a new railway? That was the very first question that they didn't even ask when they were coming up with it. It was a project that was introduced in the run-up to the 2010 election by the unelected Labour peer, who also instantly brought in tuition fees.
Adonis.
Lord Adonis.
So Lord Adonis was the original progenitor when he was Transport Minister in a Labour government. But doesn't that in itself indicate that this is something which has cross-party support? It sailed through the House of Commons, the hybrid bill is through. Now, even if you're correct in your doubts and your opposition, surely it's too late for the Stop HS2 campaign.
Well, the first problem is that the cross-party support for it from not everybody in in each of the parties meant that it never had any real scrutiny. It was very much a case of, yeah, all right, the whip say we'll do this, so they went ahead with it. But there's plenty of time to stop it. They haven't actually started building it yet.
They've spent a lot of money.
They've spent a lot of money, but they'll spend another 50 billion on their figures to finish it. You could cancel it now and have 50 billion to spend on other projects.
It's your campaign, or the campaign you lead, is it not really looking to the past? I mean, obviously, HS2 is bound to cause some environmental change. Nothing as big as that wouldn't, but basically, surely it's the fast rail is the mode of transport of the future.
HS2 is a 19th century solution to the 21st century problems. So it even starts off in Birmingham Curzon Street, which was opened in time for the coronation of Queen Victoria. It's not a current idea. You could do so much more. You could do a lot more with broadband, Wi-Fi on trains. If you go on a train these days, you will see so many people sitting there working. They don't need faster trains. They need better infrastructure on the trains. If you weren't going to do railways, you could do more investment into things like driverless cars. There's all sorts of interesting things. If you want to do a 21st century project, you don't build a fast train. You look at the future. So there's a lot of different things that you could do if you weren't spending £50 billion on HS2.
One thing that's always puzzled me about HS2, perhaps you can answer the question, in the absence of the HS2 people themselves, why did they start in London to Birmingham? Would there not been an argument for the north of England being the first, because the distances are longer, then presumably the time of travel gets much shorter?
If you wanted to start with a high-speed train, you'd look at much more options. You wouldn't necessarily just concentrate on getting to London. You'd look at the options like, would you want to go through onto HS1? And the answer is yes, you would, except the people who are designing HS2 were based in London. They saw it as the centre of the universe. That was where they were concentrating.
So you would argue that the best place for more rail investment perhaps would be east-west in the north of England to get across England and perhaps connecting Scotland with the north of England. These are quite large distances and long rail travel at the present moment in terms of journey time.
Yeah, those were all options that weren't looked at. It was very much a case of let's build a high-speed train from London, whereas if you go and talk to people in the north, or the sort of Manchester Leeds area, they cross Pennine links. If you want to go up to Scotland, you want better links from Scotland down to the places in the north of England, and obviously you want better transport sort of across Scotland as a whole. So HS2 is very much London-centric, south-east-centric. It's all based around getting to London, not about looking at these longer distance.
But with the hybrid bill through and the bulldozers metaphorically and physically almost moving in, how on earth can your campaign group mobilise to put a spoke in the HS2 wheel?
The first thing to remember is, of course, that HS2 was supposed to have been already under construction now, and it's being postponed and postponed. It's supposed to start in 2015. It's now looking at 2019. They're still doing ground surveys on the Phase 1 route. So they're way behind where they should have been if they were going to build it on their timescales. They haven't actually started building anything. That's the key point. They've knocked some things down. They've put in some of the groundworks, but they haven't actually got as far as building anything big. And even once they do, they're looking at £50 billion odd pounds or more. 50 billion is what the government thinks it's going to cost. So you're spending. You could stop it and say
£50,000 million.
£50,000 million.
Penny Gaines, let's just imagine, I know this is difficult, but let's say I'm Chris Grayling. In the absence of Chris Grayling, the Transport Secretary, who couldn't appear with us today, so what would you say to the Transport Secretary if he was here to listen to you just now?
Cancel HS2 straight away, work out what the real problems with transport in the country are, and then you can get on and do something new. HS2, it's a sort of 19th century solution to a 21st century problems. You need to look at what we need going forward. Well,
I can't stop HS2 for you, Penny, but I can present you with the Alex Salmond Quake for appearing in the show. Quake, Gaelic for a loving cup. What you do is you whiskey in the quake, and in one of these comfortable trains that you were speaking about, you pass it round all your fellow passengers.
Thank you. I'll put in my Scotch whisky and think of you when I do that.
And only Scotch, Penny.
Only Scotch.
Thank you. HS2 is meeting a rising tide of scepticism, but it can still count on parliamentary support and from the train operators and from the trade unions. People like Steve Headley of the RMT, who we interviewed recently. Looking at HS2, been the largest infrastructure project in the country at the present moment. What's the RMT view? Do you think this is a sensible investment, or do you have your doubts?
Well, I welcome any investment in the railway industry, but I have to say I think there's parts of the country where it would have been better used. For example, down into parts of Wales, down into the West Country, maybe the parts of Scotland. I think the services that are there now, from that corridor up through Birmingham, through the Midlands and the Manchester, I think it's a pretty decent service as it is. I think the money could have really been used better elsewhere.
Steve Headley, thank you very much.
There's also been considerable debate on HS2 in the Houses of Commons and Lords, with many arguing the case for the new railway initiative.
Speaker, I welcome the Secretary of State's announcements today. Certainty about the route and the timetable for progressing the project is essential if businesses are to have the confidence to invest and create jobs in the regions served by HS2. But as he acknowledged, decisions also present huge challenges for those communities most affected, and HS2 Limited has been rightly criticised for the way it dealt with communities on Phase 1. So what specific action has he taken to ensure improved engagement and address the need to respond promptly, effectively and sensitively to community concerns?
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the Honourable Lady for her support for the project as a whole. I accept the criticism that she makes. I met the leadership team of HS2 this week and expressed my concern that that should change. I am absolutely clear that as we go through the process of the hybrid bill for Phase 2A and the further process for Phase 2B, I expect HS2 to do the right thing by the affected communities. And I would invite any member of this House to come and see me or to come and see the Minister responsible if they feel that is not happening, and will seek to ensure that it does.
Mr Dennis Skinner.
In view of the fact that there are two lines that go through Derbyshire on the HS2, one that goes through Newton and the other now apparently is going to create difficulties on the Chesterfield Canal. We've also had a reference to the fact that what is the real cost of HS2? It changes quite often. What is the latest cost taking into account those two railway tracks through Derbyshire?
As I mentioned earlier, the Chesterfield Canal Trust are working with HS2 Limited and are happy with the relationship that they have and the potential outcome that's going to take place regarding the canal area. I know that the Honourable Member has reservations and has consistently raised the cost of HS2, but it is in budget and on time. We mustn't forget that once HS2 is up and running, it will be the backbone of this country, bringing along with it 100,000 jobs.
In this dismal decade of Brexit and austerity, two of the shining lights that people will remember are the Olympic Games and HS2. And one of the leading figures responsible for delivering both of them is Sir David Higgins, who at the end of this month stands down as the chairman of HS2. Could the Minister convey to Sir David the thanks of this House and the country for his brilliant work on our behalf, both in helping to deliver the Olympic Games and in helping to equip us with 21st century infrastructure? And it's about time, after the intervening 20th century, that we start to mirror the great achievements of the Victorians once again.
My Lords, I pay tribute to the part the Noble Lord played in HS2, and I will certainly pass on his good wishes to the outgoing chairman. This is one of the biggest infrastructure projects that our country has ever seen, and eventually over 100 million people are expected to use HS2 trains when the network is fully completed.
The Rail Delivery Group were unable to provide a spokesperson, but they have provided us with a statement instead. They say HS2 will become a very important part of Britain's railway for decades to come. Rail companies are already delivering over £50 billion of improvement plans to build the bigger, better, more modern network for the benefit of our customers, local communities and the economy. And HS2 is a key part of this. This far, we've looked at the economic and political arguments for and against. Even among supporters, there is a general scepticism that the timetable and budget will be met. After the break, Alex is out and about, talking to some of the communities near Euston Station in London, already at the sharp end of fast rail. Welcome back. One of the first communities to feel the impact of fast rail is Camden Town in London, site of the terminus for HS2. Alex encountered a mixture of bitterness, sadness and resolve in Coburg Street.
So, Craig, it must be compensation. They must say, well, you're taking your business away, but, fill in this form and you'll get you'll get the cash to tide you over.
Yeah, over the course of time, we've been form filling and putting in the stuff that they need for that. But it's been moved about a few times. They've moved the goalposts.
What do you mean moved about? What does that mean?
Requesting more information when we thought we'd given them everything they've got. But our team's working meticulously to make sure when we've got it all together, we've got it right, so we don't have to do it again.
So it's not that really the point that there's no compensation. It's more that is compensation delayed? Is compensation denied? Is it?
It's delayed, not denied. Yeah.
So when you got the dreaded news in, that this was it, you were getting closed down, I take it you didn't leave any of the stock behind?
Oh God, no. No, the last weekend we had a party where we drank it dry, and the only thing left wet in this place was mine and my wife's tears.
I can understand. And we're all customers, I think. One of them's here, isn't he?
He is. Bart, very good friend of the family, and was a next door neighbour for a long, long time.
How are you doing, sir? Bartley Robbins.
Yes.
You're the holdout man. You're the last man standing.
Last man standing, I'm afraid.
So your situation is that they haven't offered you rehousing because the tenancy was in the name of your partner, who is back in Scotland. But you've been paying the rent, the council tax, everything, all these years.
Everything, 25 years.
But you're not getting any help.
As I say, they referred me to a care home a couple of weeks ago, an actual old people's care home.
They want to put you in a care home, but you want a replacement flat. You want to stay in a community.
Yeah.
It must.
And I've actually got offered the flat in my ex-partner's name.
Your ex-partner's name?
Yeah.
Of course, you want one in your name that you'll have security over. It must break your heart to see the street like this.
Certainly is. I still keep in touch with all my neighbours. We're very close. We were very, very close.
So what kind of community was Colbert Street?
Oh, unbelievable, honestly.
It's
that pub, everybody was just, that was packed every night.
And did it remind you of being back in Scotland with that kind of close-knit community, yeah?
Even the homeless, we got in with a lot of the homeless people.
Yeah. So
try to help them as much as we could.
It must be an extraordinary thing living in a building site. I mean, you were telling me that when yesterday, I think this whole thing was blocked up. You had to clamber over.
Clamber over the fencing. When they were drilling, must have been drilling here.
And you were in court recently trying to assert your right. And understand you had to represent yourself, is that right?
Yes.
That must have been very difficult for you.
It was. It was.
But to put your case, but no help as yet.
No help as yet.
How about your local member of Parliament, Keir Starmer? He's a good man. Have you been to see him? Are you going to go and see him to say, look, can you help?
I have received a letter from Keir Starmer, but I'm going to go and try and get a personal...
And you've got a House of Commons connection, I understand, haven't you? Tell us what it is.
I've done state opening for the Queen for the last 15 years.
Because what were you to trade? What are you to trade?
Carpet fitter.
So you fitted the carpets in the House of Commons, but...
Many times. And all the big issues, Obama when he come over, the Pope.
I remember these visits.
Yeah, I done all the stages,
But all you're after now is an alternative house where you can fit your own carpets.
Exactly.
What would you say to Chris Grayling and his henchmen if... Chris Grayling, the Transport Secretary, came along Colbert Street today and knocked on your door and said, how are you getting on, Mr. Robbins, at number 67? What would you say to him?
Not very well at all. I'm a bag of nerves and frightened they can come round any time.
Do you think that people, when they see these great projects, do you think they aren't able to see the human side and what happens to people?
To be quite honest, I don't really know what... Everybody in this street was given a flat. They were to choose from three flats, all the new builds up Hampstead Road. Not one person from this street was given that flat. They moved them into students' flats.
So you think the
process,
not just your own case,
yeah,
but the whole process for this community could have been handled much better?
Oh, by far.
Because, if it's going to be, best of £100 billion project.
Exactly.
You think that a few million could have been set aside to make sure you sustain the community?
Yeah. Plus, as Craig, He could have been still there for months.
This is Craig Douglas, the
Chris Douglas,
host of I've been speaking to about.
yeah.
I suppose,
He's not just a.
I suppose this
he's
was
a
your
friend.
local, yeah?
Yes, it was. And it was like a neighbour, not a, I don't know, a pub. You know, it was that close a community.
So Bartley, we wish you well.
Thank you.
And I hope you seek the help of your Member of Parliament and get some justice.
I'll definitely go and try and.
And hopefully people will remember there's a human face to these projects.
Yes.
Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Craig, it's a pretty sad sight now. How did you become a victim of HS2?
Basically got notice last October that they needed a compulsory purchase order of the property.
So they just bought it whether you wanted to sell or not?
Absolutely, no choice in the matter.
And did you have any system of appeal? Could you make your case, say, can't I keep running the pub, at least for the time being?
Well, we tried. I was in front of the House of Commons and House of Lords Select Committees to argue for fair and proper compensation because I didn't think you could stop the juggernaut running.
Tell me a bit about the Brie Louise. I mean, I know it was an award-winning pub. I mean, how long were you and your lady wife running it? How long was it in the family? What did it mean to you?
When we bought it, it was called the Jolly Gardeners, and my wife and I sadly lost one of our twins named Brie Louise back in 2003. So we asked Camden Licensing if we could change the name of it, and unfortunately they granted us that permission, and it's been the Brie Louise ever since.
So it's more than just a business, there's a huge emotional attachment you had in these premises.
Oh, and it was our house and our home for 15 years as well.
And you won plenty of awards, I understand. Tell us about how popular it was here locally.
Yeah, we were a big real ale and cider pub. We were Real Ale Pub of the Year for our London Camera branch in 2009 and again in 16. And was Cider Pub of the Year in 2015.
And what's it like coming back and seeing it in this state?
It's soul-destroying for me, and my wife couldn't even face being here today.
What would your message be to Chris Grayling, the transport sector?
Basically, get things in on budget, I think, would be the first thing, and get those people paid fairly and as quickly as possible.
Are you saying you haven't been paid anything yet?
Not yet. We've got a claim in process there. HS2 are chasing us for information to finalise that, but it's a work in progress.
And so how are you living? How are you sustaining yourself and your family?
At the moment, we've spent our life savings, cashed a couple of pensions and borrowed some money from the bank.
And this is happening to neighbours, other businesses around here?
I believe there's a lot of people far worse off than me.
So behind this huge infrastructure project, which, as you say, overall budget may be out of control, but behind that project there are real human stories of people who've effectively been casualties, like literally bulldozed out the way.
Oh, absolutely. And not just a few of them.
And would there be, in your opinion, any other way to do this? I mean, could there not have been a redevelopment plan? Couldn't people have been offered an alternative accommodation nearby, maybe another pub nearby? Couldn't that have been done?
I think that was their initial plans, but it just never come to fruition.
And you think it will?
No, never, no.
So the people here who've been moved will be forgotten?
I think so, yeah, probably.
And don't you think, what's about the argument? Say, well, look, OK, it's really unfortunate that the Brie Louise has been closed, these people have been moved out of their homes, other businesses have been shut down, but this is a huge national infrastructure project. I mean, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. And what would you say to those that it's unfortunate, but look, these things have to be done? Well, yeah, they do have to be done, but the initial plans for this, which we all saw in the front of Euston Station years ago, were fabulous plans for sociable housing, for businesses and for offices and pubs and bars and restaurants. But of course that all got scrapped, so it didn't happen at all. And if they'd gone about it in that way, if there had been a more human side to what's happening to everyone here in Coburg Street, people here wider in Camden, would you have been satisfied with that? No, not really, because it's just taken them so long to do everything. Now, we asked for an extended rolling short-term lease here at the Brie Louise, and that's 7 months ago, and they haven't broken ground. They've done nothing to the place as yet. So there's no reason. You could have been operating in the last 7 months quite easily. I mean, we're filming here. You could have been the HS2 workers could have been having their pub lunches. Absolutely, absolutely. We still could have been trading it, and we could have been out of here in a week, which they knew was the plan for us. Now, actually, just say, for example, I was Chris Grayling. I know it's a leap of the imagination, but let's say I'm Chris Grayling here with my henchmen. What would your message to Chris Grayling be?
it could have been done a lot nicer.
And would this be a message that would be broadcastable, or would it be one that's expressed in stronger terms?
That's the strongest terms I'll put it for being broadcast, otherwise you wouldn't be able to broadcast it.
And what's your hopes for the future? What you and your family, and
well,
is there going to be another way to commemorate your lost daughter?
I hope so. I hope we'll be able to go again once we get our hopefully fair and proper compensation. Then another Brie Louise is in the offing.
Well, good luck to you and your family.
Thank you.
We contacted Camden Council regarding rehousing and compensation for Craig and Bartley. And Councillor Danny Beales, the Cabinet Member for Investing in Communities in Camden, emailed us the following statement. We continue to assist everyone who faces losing their homes to make sure they get the best possible advice and support with the most appropriate housing options available to them. If any resident fears they may be made homeless, they should contact us at the earliest opportunity so we can assist. They go on to add, we have made seeking compensation for Camden residents significantly affected by HS2 disruption our priority. We took our push for fair and extra compensation to the House of Lords Select Committee, who recommended HS2 Limited produce a Camden-specific compensation scheme. So out and about in Camden, we didn't discover much comfort for people worried about the community impact of HS2. It might be thought that in a £65 billion project, there would have been room for the community investment the people of Coburg Street claim they were promised. Of course, it's not possible to mount a full-scale transport revolution without changing the physical landscape. However, the trouble with the HS2 revolution is it might be outdated before it's built. Isambard Kingdom Brunel astonished the world by building the Great Western Railway in the 1830s. He developed the whole 150-mile revolutionary wide-gauge line from design through parliamentary bills right through Box Hill. He even built Paddington Station. He did all that in under 8 years. Even with no more slippage, HS2 first phase to Birmingham will take more than twice that time for the same distance. And even the notoriously expensive Brunel was relatively cheaper than HS2. Indeed, a secret Cabinet Office report leaked to the Sunday Times recently suggested the whole project was highly likely to go as much as 60% over budget, and the cost could balloon to more than £80 billion. One thing's for sure, even HS2 is the only show in town to fast-linked cities. It's still unlikely to last 200 years of Brunel's railway masterpiece. So now from Taz and me and everyone at the Alex Salmond Show, it's goodbye for now.